Let's go.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Atlanteans University Studios. I am your host this afternoon, Dr. Miya Burt-Stewart, and I'd like to say welcome to our audience and those that have thought enough of us to tune in on this evening. We will be talking today. The topic will be Love Your Career. And that career is in consulting. And so along with that, we've got such a treat on this evening. We've got a very dynamic individual here in the studios with us, Mr. Daniel Updegraft with Development Finance International, Washington, D.C. based consulting firm. And so Daniel brings to us more than 15 years of experience as a consultant, global experience. And when I say global, I mean global. And so without further ado, we will allow for Daniel to chime in. Hello, my friend. Long time no see.
Long time, Maya. It's such a pleasure to be here. It's wonderful after a couple of years of not seeing you to see you again and see this energy that you always have that I appreciate so much. And it's also nice to be here at the university again. I've noticed that the university has grown.
Yes.
It's looking very, very nice. There's a lot of energy here.
And
so it's so wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, we are so excited to have you back, Daniel. I think that to have such a university and to have such a dynamic business program, as well as our other programs, but certainly our business program here at Atlanteans University, and to have a cadre, right, just a broad cadre of individuals in terms of students from all over the globe. What other person would we bring to have conversations with us other than yourself, right?
Well, thank you. And, I hope this topic is one that, resonates with the audience, with the student bodies. I know that the students here are especially the business school students, as they're thinking of the next chapter of their life after they graduate, and they're exploring different options in the market. Consulting, business consulting, it's something that I think is interesting. It's an opportunity. It's a career that is it's growing. In a growing industry, if you will. And so, I think this is something that can be of interest.
Absolutely. You having 15 years, right, in the industry, I've got, and I don't want to say it because I'll admit my age, but having 20 years, right, in the game, it's amazing. I think about the rewards that have come with being a consultant, but I'm also reminded of the challenges, right? I won't say the hard times or the bad times, but I will say I think about the challenges, that have come with being a consultant, right? Challenges that 2008, an economic downturn has brought us, challenges that COVID has brought us, right? Being a consultant, that's entrepreneurship. And so that's one of those things wherein if you don't kill the fish, you don't eat. Right. So, and we'll get into more of that. But, you yourself traveling the globe, working with such an international organization. Right. You're in the heart of Washington, D.C., where business is done. Business is made and business is done. But having a global operation and having to maintain and sustain that, I'm sure you know all about the challenges that come with consultancy.
Well, I certainly have in my cheat sheet here. I have some pros and some cons about the industry, that I've lived. I think you've lived as well, right? And we can certainly kind of dive into some of these, and I think they'll shed some light on kind of what it is like to be a consultant. Mm-hmm. What is this, to have a job as a consultant? Mm-hmm. I think these are kind of relevant points. I thought maybe if you permit, kind of talking about what kind of consulting firms a little bit, kind of, because I know you have some good insight onto with regards to kind of the different firms that are out there, firms that hire, graduates from programs like here, for example. Of course, there's individual consultants, and there's some there are smaller boutique firms, kind of like the firm that you run.
Yes.
The firm that I work for is considered a boutique firm, right? We're about 30 or 40 consultants. Some firms are a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, and then of course there are the large consulting firms, and that's a different kind of ball game. But they sell time for money, basically. What it is, they're selling know-how, knowledge.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you talk about the boutiques and the big boys, right? You and my firm, certainly a boutique firm. You work for a boutique firm, and then there are the big boys, right? The McKinseys, right? The Boos. Some of the other large firms that actually consult with the consultant, right? We get some of our projects by partnering or becoming subcontracting consultants, to the big boys. So we can talk about that, but we can open up, I guess, with talking about areas of consulting. So our engineer has some visuals for us when it comes to areas of consulting. And so, as we look here, we open with popular industries for consulting services. And so financial services, the public sector, government services, energy, and healthcare, right? So these are very popular industries. But then we also have a second slide, which shows us the popular expertise, right? Or those areas that are popular by way of the specificity of the type of consulting. So we've got strategy consulting, management consulting, digital consulting, and HR consulting. So without a doubt, consulting is a very broad field, right? Very broad field. I think that I think that any kind of service that is offered can be offered, by way of a W-2 or a consulting, right, from a contract basis. What do you think about that?
Well, I know from our experience at DFI, we are hired on a contractual basis, right? Most of our clients are they're on a retainer, and they hire us year over year. Sometimes we're able to negotiate 2-year contracts, and that's a very long contract for a consultant, right?
Yes.
We do have some what we call special projects. These are on a contract basis. However, it's usually a shorter term. Sometimes they're 2 months, 3 months kind of studies. And then at the end of the study, we hand over basically a report with recommendations. And then usually at that point, the client would implement our recommendations. So that's kind of how we're hired.
Okay. And so then my organization would be one of, I'd say, management and strategy, right? MD Stewart and Associates. We contract from, our clients are cities, right, municipalities, to corporate, to nonprofits. And so would DFI be more so a public sector consulting, or which would you say?
I think we fall under the strategy, and we see ourselves as an outsourced business development arm for organizations, and we're typically hired by multinational firms. There's some kind of smaller but private firms as well. And increasingly, we've been hired by trade promotion agencies. So sort of like, here we have Enterprise Florida. We haven't been hired by them yet, but similar organizations that promote the exports from their, whether it be a state or a country. So we've been hired, for example, by the export promotion agencies of 2 provinces of Spain. And so these provinces they're relatively small, but they have pretty strong economies, and they're strong in areas like IT or renewable energies. And so they've hired us to help their companies export into emerging markets, because we specialize in emerging markets. So, and then we've also been hired by a couple trade promotion agencies from the Finnish government, the Israeli government, and a number of other governments that kind of offer these services to their companies.
Yeah, and so I think you said it, your firm, DFI is contracted to help deliver into emerging markets. Is that correct, Daniel?
That's right, Maya. So,
Yeah.
so when we work in emerging markets only, we do not support businesses that are looking to grow, say, in the United States or Canada or Western Europe.
Wow.
That's not our cup of tea. You can't, be an expert at everything. So we focus on, Latin America, Africa, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, going into South Asia, Southeast Asia, and so on.
Wow.
So
Wow.
exciting places.
Wow. And so I'm going to tax our engineers really quick. Our next slide would show us consulting demographics, but I want to jump, if we can, and jump to that last slide if we can, particularly where we get into the global breakdown, particularly as you have just described, Daniel, many of the countries, right, that you all contract with. Can I have that last slide, if you will? So the global breakdown, right? The global breakdown of consultancy. And so this is a slide that shares with us by country, right? The number of consultants that each country has. And so I guess it goes without saying that United States, 44.5%. Right, of I guess entrepreneurs in the United States are consultants. That's a really huge number. That's a really large number. And it's not surprising, particularly since we have more small businesses than we do Fortune 500 in our country.
That's true.
Interesting. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I think also what I see here is, interestingly, 160 billion is the size of the consulting market, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably an annual number. But it's not that surprising that the majority of consultants are based in the United States. I think it's also a reflection of, in addition to the small businesses here, but there's some advantages for companies here to hire consultants, right?
Okay.
So whether you're a big company or a small company, their cost structures that make it more advantageous to hire external knowledge, rather than hiring staff, the overhead that comes with hiring people to be on your team at the company.
Yes.
So this is basically an outsourcing, if you will, of they're looking for to fill gaps in expertise and knowledge, and so that's just kind of a dynamic of our environment that we live in, the economy in the United States. So I mean, it is and I think that's why this is an important conversation, right? Because as students think about what are the opportunities when I leave the university, the field of consulting, it's an industry that's growing. It's because it's very large here, and I think that there are important opportunities.
And so you said something, and it's shown here, $160 billion industry. And one of the things that I shared, and you've kind of alluded to it, and I think about it, even being a small firm, right, boutique firm, my firm still does it, right, the contracting. So you talked about how countries contract with consultants, right, and how I mentioned how even larger consulting firms contracts with consulting. I'm a smaller boutique. I contract with consultants, right? A large part of my business. And so I have 2.5, employees, but the bulk of the folk that work even with my firm are consultants. They own their own businesses, and they have an expertise in an area that I need. And we put together a subcontracting agreement, right? And this consulting firm will provide such and such services. It's so interesting, though, how it seemingly trickles down, right? So from country, right, to large organizations to small organizations. And then we've got second in place Europe. And that about makes sense, right? United Kingdom, Germany, Australia, France, that makes perfect sense. And so that's 28% of 160 billion. And then as we go down, you've got China, Canada. Now, I am a bit surprised that Canada's numbers are so low, and only because I think about North America, right? And just kind of more so, some of the, I guess when I think about just revenue and economies, right, and money moving, that does surprise me a bit, when I look at Canada.
Sure, it does.
And so in going through and just kind of, perusing, I guess that looks about right. I'm a bit surprised, I have to say, that the numbers are so low in other countries. But I guess that speaks volumes to America, and that speaks volumes to folk like me and folk like you, huh, Daniel? And so if what we'll do real quick is, so these are the percentages of those that make up 160 billion, or the market. And so I'll have our engineer, if you will, kind of flow with us. We'll go back to the last slide where it rolls out the demographics. Now, so this is also interesting, right? So now if we look at just the U.S. alone, 499,000, like almost 500,000 consultants or consulting firm, or I guess consulting services throughout the United States alone. I like the way that this slide, breaks it down for us from a research or a summary standpoint. 41.6% of all consultants are women. Ooh, ah. While 58% are men. Interesting. The average age, 43.
Yeah, interesting.
Interesting. Now, does that shock you, or does that make sense?
Well, I think it doesn't totally shock me, because I think of, there are opportunities for young professionals, but I also know of people that toward the end of their career, when they're such an expert in a given material,
Sure.
they often retire from wherever they are, and then they say, I'm going to start a consulting business,
Sure,
and then I'm going
sure.
to sell my know-how to somebody else,
Absolutely.
either back to their original employer or to a competitor or to somebody else in the industry. So I think that 43 makes a lot of sense. My eyes jump down when I look at some of these, like because I know one of the questions from the students is going to be, what is the average salary for a consultant? And I think that's insightful. I jumped to it. It's highlighted by your colleague, the 89,000 or 90,000 is probably a base salary kind of average in the consulting industry. And I did some kind of parallel research on this as well, and found kind of an article online that was written by a BCG former Boston Consulting Group BCG recruiter, and she had some insightful data from the big guys. The big three, the McKinsey, BCG, and Bain. And then the tier 2 big 4, like KPMG, EY, help me here, Deloitte, and I'm drawing a blank. And
Price?
PricewaterhouseCoopers,
Yes.
PwC, you got it. And kind of how the first tier, the second tier, and then boutique, and kind of gave a range. And it is very tiered, but I think that 90K average salary it makes sense, right, compared to the data that she puts forth.
For a startup boutique firm, and so let's make sure that we clarify. So boutique is a certain number, right? Less than, would you say 50? Less
That's
than,
about
less,
right,
certainly less than 100, but less than 50 or less would be a boutique firm. And then there is individual consultancy, right?
Correct.
So there's the true entrepreneurship, right? Or the single member, so to say, consultant. And so 90,000, sum it up, 90,000 being the average annual salary. And what I would be interested to know is, and not necessarily that I'd be interested to know, I guess I can think about myself, how long did it take me to get to 90,000? How long did I stay at 90,000? And I guess, and I guess, where I am now, right? How does, what does that look like from a growth standpoint,
Sure.
right? What does that look like from a growth standpoint? And just up under there, Washington, D.C., pays an annual average wage of $102,000. But remember, I just said to you, right, you're with the firm DFI that's in the heart of DC, that's in the heart of where business is done and where deals are made, right? It's our capital. And so that's where our government is located. That's where tons and tons of contracting takes place, right? And as a consultant, all of my work is contract work.
Sure.
I remember spending a couple of years ago, certainly about 2, 3 years, or even 4 years prior to COVID, being in D.C. every 5 minutes at the SBA, right, trying to lobby for business. And I chose to go to D.C. and lobby the feds because, who has deeper pockets, right, than the feds?
Sure.
So, interesting.
And one point on, kind of when you're asking yourself, how long did it take me to get to this point? How long, after this point, where do I go? I'm kind of jumping into another topic a little bit, kind of parallel, but the pros and the cons of consulting, right? So one of the pros that I have here is exposure within your client organizations to senior people, right?
Okay.
Because when you're thinking about what comes next, you're developing your know-how in this industry, but you're also developing your relationships, right? So, a couple kind of anecdotes come to mind. And just high-level relationships. But one of my consultants is it's a Fortune 100 company, right? And I've been working with them, leading our work for this group. It's a medical medical equipment manufacturer, global company. They invoice around, I think it's about 20 or 30 billion euros a year. And I've met their CEO, right? And I don't have a lot of engagement with him, but I've had the opportunity to have that kind of relationship in the C-suite, and then other kind of clients as well, where I've had one other client that's a smaller company. I've traveled with their CEO and the owner of the company, multiple times. So those sort of, when you think about your progression in the field of consulting, you start at a certain number. Here they say the starting salary is 67,000 is the average. Okay, but you get up to 90 is the average. And then what comes next, right? What are the next doors that open? Because you do think about that, right? Because
absolutely,
you're always moving forward, right?
Absolutely.
So those sort of relationships are something that I consider a very strong pro, right, in the industry of consulting.
Yes. I would agree, Daniel. And you say, we're always thinking about moving forward, right? Always thinking about growth. What else is there, right? Because I think, in an offline conversation, we've talked about, I've joked and talked about, how there were days, and starting out, how there were days where I could buy peanut butter but no jelly, ham but no burger, French but no fries. So being silly, but certainly, some of the challenges that come along, right? You identified a pro, which is just the expansion, right? The exposure, the expansion, the ability to expand based on exposure, the relationship building, right? Being able to travel throughout and be recognized, or being able to make a call and have, key persons pick up the phone. Yeah, that's big, right? And so, the flip side of it is, as we're talking about consulting and loving your career and it being exciting, you've got to grow, right? Like, we've got to start somewhere. I think about, and my story is very interesting. I've never really thought about it, right? Being a service disabled veteran, and I remember I would get my, I would get paid through the military. And I remember I took my military pay and opened my first office, right? I took my military pay from the reserve and opened my first office. And I can't explain or, even put in words what it felt like to now feel like you're really in the game, right? Because for so long I would get up and put on, something really cute kind of and go into the living room. But finally I was able to progress beyond the living room and go into an office, right? And then finally I was able to get the contracts, and then you get more contracts. And so it's, I guess there's never enough, right? Because, as an entrepreneur, everybody's not, everybody doesn't have that mentality. And so if you do have that mentality, that says something, right? And that says that this is the kind of person, I think, in my mind, that is not going to stop, right? Don't try to stop him or her, right? Don't get in the way, right? Just kind of let them go. So I do enjoy consulting and being a consultant. I do enjoy some of the perks. Now, here's what I think may be a misconception. Here's my thoughts. And so, I know people that will say, oh, I'm a consultant. I can make my own schedule. I can, play golf whenever I want to. And I just remember thinking in my head, if you can play golf whenever you want to, you're broke, right? because,
Yeah.
because truly, a consulting, when you are in the game and you've got business and you're shaking and moving, yeah, you don't work for you, right? And you don't have time to play golf, usually.
I think two things come to mind. One is if your client asks you for something, you're already late.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
Because a good consultant anticipates what the client's going to need, or you already have your plan that you've put together with the client and you're executing on the plan.
Yes.
So when they say, Miya, where is this? Or can you do this for me? You've already missed it, right?
I agree.
And so if you think you're golfing and doing stuff and whatnot, you're not going to be around very long.
Yeah.
Because the second kind of anecdote that comes to mind, in my 15 years working for DFI in the consulting industry, I remember one scenario where there was a colleague who wasn't around for very long. And she, would leave the office and I mean, we all would leave the office to go for lunch, obviously. I mean, we're not, stuck in the office, but I remember her packing up and leaving early one day, just said she didn't have anything to do. And I said, you didn't have anything to do. Okay. And it was kind of registering in my head. And then, a few days later, I got the news she had been laid off. She wasn't a, cultural fit for the company or whatever it is. But I mean, it's you really have to be, proactivity is the name of the game. Yep. You have to be a go-getter. And if you have those kind of that desire, that yearn to achieve more, you could be a good fit for this. But yeah, when you say going golfing and controlling your schedule, you can go golfing on a Saturday or a Sunday, right?
Maybe
There's time for it,
right?
But,
if you're new, not necessarily if you're new. If you have enough business and you don't have to hustle so hard, or if you're new. But I used to become bothered really by that when people would say, and it's they say it in a very braggadocious way, oh I run my own business, I can go golf, I can do what I want to do, I can at some point I began to say and kind of certainly feel you're broke, because I am a consultant and there is very little time and opportunity to to play golf or to vacation or to do. But that's my hustle, right? And another thing you've said, if your client is asking for it, you're already behind the 8 ball. You're already late. You're already late. So what else you got? You got some other...
So, I mean, you brought up an interesting point. I think you said, at some point you had some money for the ham, but not for the burger, right? And and it kind of, also I think about not putting all your eggs in one basket, right? So especially when you're an individual consultant, or if you're working for a boutique firm, you have multiple clients, right?
Yes,
you're not going to survive probably with just one client. You could, depending on the size of the contract, but then there's a lot of risk if you only have one contract,
i.e.
right?
COVID, there's tons of risk, Daniel.
Or a management change in that company and they change direction. They say, we don't need this consultant. We're slashing, costs and whatnot. So we have to, keep things diversified.
Absolutely.
And I have that on my list as a pro and as a con as well. Because as a pro, we are exposed to all sorts of different industries. And so one thing that I have here is when I list the things where my job has exceeded my expectations, right? I've been able to work in a number of different industries. So I work, right now I have 3 projects, and I'm working in basically building hospitals, equipping hospitals. That's one.
Awesome.
The next one is financial management. So how ministries of finance can improve the way they manage the public resources, right? Through a number of solutions. And then the third thing is actually a very cool project that we're working on, and it has to do with pediatric schistosomiasis, which is a disease mainly in Africa. And so our client is launching a new pediatric version of this drug that cures this disability, this ailment, right? So we have this diversity where we get exposed to so many different areas, which I think is very, personally, it's very rewarding for me.
Absolutely, yeah.
And but I do have it as a con as well,
Interesting.
because if you do lose a contract, I mean, we do feel the pinch as consultants. I
Sure.
mean, sometimes years are really good. At my company, we've had some very good years. You mentioned 2008.
Yes.
And I'll tell you something about 2008. We actually grew. Because you remember the crisis of 2008 impacted especially mature markets, so North America, Western Europe, and there are places in emerging markets where the economies were rolling along perfectly fine and even growing. Commodity-rich countries. In 2008, around there, I went to Nigeria a few times, and Nigeria was growing at I don't remember the percentage. It was 8%, 9% a year, something it's ridiculous compared to
Wow.
our economies that are shrinking.
Sure.
So what did multinational corporations do? They said, okay, let's bet on emerging markets. They have money. Our sales in North America and Western Europe are going to shrink. So let's get our sales in Africa and Latin America and Eastern Europe and South Asia and so forth. So we, in certain periods, we did okay, but COVID was a different crisis. And so we didn't, we felt the pinch, everybody did. We didn't see a geography that was immune, right, from the economic impact. So I mean, things, so the importance of diversifying, of having different revenue streams, having different clients was certainly key.
And it's interesting, my story sounds a bit like DFI's. 2008. My firm flourished, right? And, listen, I'm in business. I found a niche, right? And, it works. And so I make money when companies are not doing well. So we do business development consulting. And so 2008, an economic downturn, you've got big firms that no longer have budgets to do business with smaller firms. You've got nonprofits that have been impacted. And so they looked forward to someone like my firm to come in and help with either diversifying and or stabilizing, but certainly helping to create a sustainable operation. So when markets are bad, that's when it's good for me. I didn't do this, right? It's just, it is what it is. But you fast forward and you talk about COVID. Well, that's a different dynamic. No one was immune. I did well, quite like DFI, during the economic downturn in 2008, but in 2020, when COVID hit, I was impacted just as much as KPMG, DFI, and the mom and pops, right? We all were impacted. But when you talk about diversify, we had another offline conversation, and how just diversification is extremely important. And my firm got to find out that even more so as a result of COVID. And so I'm in an industry, we adopted food distribution. Well, you're talking about a chick that has done business development consulting and project management for the last, 18 years. And so now we're doing food distribution. COVID taught me that not only is, because I think we were diversified, quite like you talk about, right? And the pediatric, the drug in Nigeria, right? The equipment, right? We were diversified, and so I had clients as municipalities, quite a few municipalities, nonprofits, and corporations. But they were all impacted by COVID. So what do? I was fortunate enough, actually blessed enough, to be able to get partnered with the group. And, one of the things that happens, I think, during any crisis, food has to move. Right? People
That's
are going
right.
to eat, and food has to move. And I think I just kind of said, well, hey, why can't I be moving some of that food, right? So that if another economic downturn comes, if another COVID comes, if any other kind of pandemic comes, food has to move. And so while I would not become insulated, I think I would certainly still be able to do business, to make a couple dollars, if
Sure.
nothing else.
You're a very dynamic businesswoman, entrepreneur, and I can see. I'm not surprised that you kind of just branched out, tried something new, and but that's kind of the business mentality that you have, right?
I've got, thank you. And yes, Daniel, we have to. Again, COVID, even here at Atlantis University, right? And, AU Studios, right, while it's 2 years later, still as a result of, right, previous events, right? COVID. So not a direct result of COVID, but just, and the university looking at, how we must make sure that we are doing business so that these kinds of events do not impact us so much in the absolute worst way, right?
Sure.
What are some of the things that we can do? AU Studios is the university diversifying, right? Diversifying into an area wherein it's not academics, right? But it is an area that allows us to, at some point bring on advertising, right? At some point be in global markets. And so, and ultimately lend towards recruiting, which is what? Revenue generating, right? So certainly, whether it's direct or whether it's indirect, COVID has taught us a lesson. And I think that in many ways, every business has made decisions. And so even if it was to close the doors, right, we've all had to make some really tough decisions. And so I have absolutely enjoyed this time. I knew it was going to be all I dreamed it was, supposed to be, and it was. Daniel, you come back and you always bring
thank you.
And a very exciting time, great conversation, educating me, in the biggest way. So,
well, it's such a pleasure, and I mean, I could have many more conversations with you,
and we will.
I always learn from you, and I appreciate. I mean, you're such a great host here. So,
thank you.
Again, thank you, and I thank the university.
Absolutely,
as well
absolutely. It's because of in individuals. I say individuals, but because I'm trying to keep it short, but gurus, such as yourself, that allows us to be able to tap into players, right? Learn about organizations such as DFI, learn about extraordinary consultants such as yourself, learn about, how just the subject of emerging markets and what you all are doing, right, in emerging markets. We talk about that in the classroom, right,
Sure.
all the time here. I follow emerging markets, right, on TV because I need to know what's going on, right? I'm looking for global opportunities, right? Whether it's as a small business woman, owned business, as a service disabled vet business, I'm always looking even for global opportunities and emerging markets, underdeveloped. I'll take it.
I mean, yeah, emerging markets. I mean, that's where my heart is at.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're very exciting, right? There's so much potential in these markets, and so rightfully so, we are placing our interest there.
Yes.
And I do hope that that there's interest in consulting here at the university. Certainly, I mean, give me a call if you ever want me to come back and talk to students.
Yes.
It'd be a pleasure, right?
We certainly
have
would.
an exchange of ideas. So.
Absolutely. We've got a student body, as you know, that's very eclectic, right? We've got, if there's a country or a city on the map, right, on the globe, right, I think if not here at Atlantis University, certainly here in Miami, there's someone from that country or that city here in Miami. And so we've got a very diverse body of professionals, right? Certainly, I think, our MBAs, pretty much come to us as established professionals, many of them, right? We've got some new ones that'll come from an undergrad program, but some of them have been consultants, some of them are interested in taking that avenue, which is why this was a great topic to have today, right? Love your career, consulting. And so with that, we want to thank our viewers for tuning in. I like to say there would be no AU without you. And so we encourage you to continue to tune in with us, continue to follow us. If you have topics or ideas that you think that we should be covering here at Atlantis University Studios, we encourage you to send those in and share with us. Until next time, we appreciate you and we look forward to seeing you. Feel free to tune in with us at atlantisstudios.com and we'll see you next time.